in Paris. So, friends, at ICANN meetings of late, what we have been witnessing and what has been engaging most of our attention during the recent few months has been, how ICANN is coming to grips with tackling the GDPR and complying with the GDPR, and how to reconcile its legacy WHOIS system in terms of the changes which have been brought in the wake of the implementation of the GDPR, the kicking into effect. So as all of you may know, the GDPR got enacted 2 years back, sometime in 2016. However, it was set to come in force on 25th of May 2018. And now, of course, it has already kicked into action, and we have what is known as the temporary specification, which determines how the various GTLD registry operators comply with the various tenets of the GDPR, and then there is this working group, the Expedited Policy Development Process, the EPDP, so to say, which has come into being to evolve and to formulate policy for ICANN and for the various GTLD operators, which is compliant with the GDPR, as well as which is in the which is sort of driven by the bottom-up multi-stakeholder process of the ICANN community. So I can share with you some perspectives on that, and the central themes which have been occupying our attention during the deliberations of the workshop revolve around what could be considered as legitimate purpose for disclosure of WHOIS data pertaining to people, to third parties backed by legitimate interest. Then there are, of course, discussions about whether there should be a one-size-fits-all kind of a uniform rollout of the proposed policy for legal as well as natural persons. As you may all possibly be aware, the GDPR applies only to living natural persons who are European Union data subjects. So, but for commercial considerations and for on grounds of uniformity and commercial reasonableness, the various GTLD operators are proposing to roll out the GDPR across the board, irrespective of whether they are natural persons or legal persons. And partly this is also contributed to by the very stringent nature of the fines, the economic penalties which are applicable, and of course, as they say or they claim, the difficulties in determining, whether it's a natural person or a legal person. Other than that, of course, there are debates around the geographic applicability of the temporary specification and the rollout of the policies for the WHOIS compliance. So as you may all know, the GDPR essentially applies either to European Union data subjects or to the data pertaining to people which was captured or processed in regard to their activities in the European Union while they were in the European Union. So that is, I'm trying to put it in as non-legal and as simple language as possible. Of course, for those who may be interested in a formal reading, the act is, the legislation is out there on the web, and you're free to refer to it. So, but on the basis of, once again, on commercial reasonableness and uniformity considerations, the GTLD operators are proposing to roll it out pan-globe in the same uniform manner. So do we have some ideas about it, whether it should be rolled out globally in a single way, applicable across to all the citizens, or should we differentiate between for those for whom essentially it is applicable and have a different rule book or a different application for those who do not directly attract the tenets of the GDPR is again a question which is being intensely debated and discussed. Then of course there are several niche tracks depending upon which place you sit or which stakeholder you represent, and those would be around, disclosure to law enforcement agencies, cybersecurity investigators, and IP rights practitioners in terms of tiered access and different protocols which could be utilized for throwing back the data. We have what is being thrown around and what is proposed by ICANN.org, which is known as the possible framework elements of a unified access model. So this access model essentially defines who may get access to third-party data and how that access may be procured, or how that access may take place. So for those who amongst you who may be interested, I would strongly recommend that you look up the unified access model of ICANN.org, and maybe you'll be able to come up with few interesting suggestions as to how improvements to that model could be made. And this kind of brings us to the very interesting developments which are taking place in this whole area. However, all this debate and discussion about the relevance of the WHOIS and whether WHOIS is the way forward, or should we plan some kind of sunsetting requirements for the WHOIS and come up with some next generation protocol like possibly the RDAP, which could take its place. They all kind of also point us to another important fact, that privacy regimes and privacy regulations are also gaining ground worldwide. And it is for this reason that at this point of time, our governments and even the international bodies like ICANN have been forced to take note and think and do a conscious implementation of these legislations and these regimes, privacy regimes, just to safeguard the data pertaining to your data, the citizens' data. Other than that, possibly there are several other important tracks which are taking place at ICANN in terms of there's what is known as HRIL. I would be able to speak only about the tracks which are taking place in the GAC, or those tracks in which I am a party to. So there is the HRIL, which is the Human Rights and International Law Working Group. Then there is what is known as the NORMCOM Working Group, which is basically about how and what should be the characteristics of representatives to the nominating committee of ICANN. Then there is what is also known as the Operating Principles Working Group, which basically deals with GAC's internal operating principles. GAC, as probably you would all be aware, is the Governmental Advisory Committee at ICANN. Then, of course, we have what is called, which is another of the GNSO PDPs in which GAC is participating as a chartering organization. So we have what is called the Work Track 5 and the Work Track 1 to 4. So this is a part of what is called the SubPro Working Group, or the Subsequent Procedures, New GTLD Subsequent Procedures Working Group. And while the Work Tracks 1 to 4 are being dealt with as a whole, and the initial report has been put out already for your public comments. However, the Work Track 5, which is specifically to do with the subject of geographic names and their treatment, is being dealt with separately, and is also an activity in which the GAC is participating in and presenting its views. So we, of course, on behalf of the Government of India, are also presenting and advancing the policy positions of the Government of India from time to time, and at these various forums and at these various working tracks. All that having been said, possibly what I would like to hear more from you guys from is what, in your opinion, should be those policy positions which you see, or which you look forward to the government advancing, and what is your point of view about the various subjects which are being dealt with at ICANN. So I would like to throw the floor open to you, and if you have any questions, you're most welcome, and I would love to take them. Thank you.
Yeah, first one behind you. Please identify yourself and name and organization, and then address.
So this is Krishna here. I'm a technology and a policy professional. My question is more specific to the new bill that is being introduced for data protection. Sir, why was reconciliation or recovery from harm-based approach chosen and a rights-based approach in the overall essence of the bill?
Well, I am not sure I am the best person to answer that, and personally I have not really been involved with either the formulation of that bill or with that aspect specifically, because that is being dealt with by a totally separate division in the ministry, and I don't feel qualified to answer that. However, I can park that for you somewhere and possibly make sure that a suitable reply to your question is fed back to you.
Yeah, and there is a separate session on this. You can address. Yes, please.
I'm Dr. Sudhakar AM. My question regarding GAC. I have seen GAC, and most of the people, all the countries' representatives, they don't have any consensus regarding any policy. Do you agree or not? This I have seen in Copenhagen. I was sitting behind, and most of the things, even after the closure of ICANN, then I couldn't see anything from GAC.
That is. I would not necessarily agree with you on that, because as you may possibly be aware, we have a formal system of GAC advice to the ICANN board, which is communicated in form of an ICANN communicate, GAC communicate to the ICANN board, and that more often than not reflects what is known as GAC consensus advice. So I would not go so far as to say that there is no agreement between the governments. That having been said, I personally feel that on certain issues of concern to the governments, I think there is a lot of debate and discussion seen, and possibly a great amount of agreement also and consensus also. So GAC does come to consensus on positions and matters which concern the governments. But just to also offer my salutation to what you are saying, I don't think that either consensus or dissent is something which is which does not have its place in society. So all that having been said, I greatly value the experience which I get at GAC because of the sheer diversity and the sheer difference of perspectives which the different members bring along with them, both culturally as well as from the point of view of the various perspectives from which the same issue can be looked at and possibly arouse different concerns in the minds of the people. And so I really feel honored to be a part of these proceedings because of the great value all the discussions which take place at the GAC bring. I personally find that there is a lot of traction amongst the various governments and the governmental stakeholders there in the GAC about issues which hold general concern for most governments, and they do finally, despite airing each of their respective concerns and their respective ideas and their respective perspectives, they each do tend to coalesce and come around to some policy positions which get the general consensus of the House, so to say, and that is how the work is able to advance. I personally feel that the GAC has been able to get a lot of work done over the past several meetings that I have had the privilege to be a party to. And I'm sure if we go into the history of the GAC as an organization also, the GAC has come a long way. It has shaped the policies at ICANN. It has successfully shaped the policies of the internet and how the internet is run. And I'm sure it has got a lot of work done. Thank you.
I think yesterday Santosh also said now that several issues with India specific things were also the GAC handled and resolved for our favor anyway. Your please.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Samrit. I'll be attending the IGF in November as an ISOC fellow. So my question is that as the representative of GAC from India, what are some of the top 3 or 4 prioritized things that you intend to discuss and debate in the upcoming IGF? Thanks.
Well, as a representative of the Government of India, the topmost priority for us right now is, of course, I would say the EPDP, which is a working group at ICANN, and the whole formulation of the WHOIS policy around that and how that pans out in the future. And I don't expect it to be complete in a hurry, although the initial report is likely to be put out by the end of this month and before what we see as the Internet Governance Forum's annual meeting. However, I'm sure that even when we go down to the annual meeting, there will be a lot of discussion around how the future policy of the WHOIS is going to evolve and what shape it is going to take there. Apart from that, I see a lot of focus on discussions around the IoT, discussions around many of the new technologies like AI and data analytics and stuff like 5G but all this from the perspective and from the point of view about how it is going to transform and translate into the lives of the Indian citizens. So while these technologies are there and they are going to come, however, what is going to be important to be seen is how they are going to be utilized for good. For instance, drones. Drones is something which may be applied for both good and bad, and the same is the case with any other technology which is disruptive. For instance, if we go back into history, it was gunpowder. So, so the essence of our focus is going to be how to translate all these new technologies to bring good for the citizens of India, and that is going to be topmost in our mind. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, after this you will be.
Yeah. Hey, this is Harsh. So I had a question. Who all have a seat at the table when formulating and discussing India's stance on issues you speak about? And second, what sort of input is taken from other stakeholders within the government and outside the government, and to what extent is that considered?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you kindly repeat that?
Okay, sure, sorry. So basically, when formulating India's stance on different topics you will talk about at the IGF or at the ICANN or any other meeting, who all play a role in formulating this stance, and for formulating that stance, whose opinions are considered and to what extent?
So, just to answer your question, we within the ministry also try as far as possible to follow a multi-stakeholder process in our decision making, and we try our level best to obtain comments and opinions, viewpoints from the relevant stakeholders in order to arrive at our policy positions which we advance for any issue. So, for instance, specifically regarding the PDP and the WHOIS, we followed the same process and we wrote to all the stakeholders and elicited their views and opinions, and then we formulated all those into policy papers and options and we put them up to the competent authority on the file, and then there was a lot of lot of churning in between, lot of consultation and lot of divergent viewpoints coming in from various stakeholders. We try to reconcile them into a comprehensive kind of a policy position for the Government of India, got it approved by the competent authority, and then we advance it. So normally that is the process we follow. However, for instance, in topics like the EPDP, which, as you know, possibly by its very design and by its very nature follows what is called a very expedited kind of a rate of flow, and there are the meetings which are taking place in the form of conference calls almost every other day. Almost every day we have conference calls from 6:30 to 8:30 in the night. So that kind of a format at times brings to bear pressures which kind of makes an extended kind of a consultation both impossible as well as unnecessary probably. And so in order to react to the needs and the demands of the situation, we have to customize our policy, we have to bring changes to our, a way of working and make it more flexible in order to be able to keep pace with that kind of a process. And so, I mean, whatever changes that were brought to bear were kind of, which were required, were brought to bear, and hopefully we have now been able to zero in onto a process and onto a structure in which we are able to at least keep in step with what is going on and to provide inputs as and when necessary as per the best of our ability. And that is I think an approach which is central to our policy making, and that is the approach which we intend to follow in the future also. So while it is our best intention to cast the net wide and sort of to try and get as many different points of view as possible. However, depending upon the need of the situation, we also plan to be nimble on our feet and flexible enough to be able to respond to the need of the hour and to any challenge which any of these situations may throw at us. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Hello sir, my name is Pankaj and I'm an ICANS business constituency member, and yesterday I gave a 4-point strategy to promote and more exposure of .in, and because I love my country's own TLD more than anything else. My question to you that is, from the NICSI side, are you guys planning, or can you just brief us about any plans that might be there to promote .in more, for more exposure and to make it competitive as much as .com for India?
So hi Pankaj, I first of all I'm delighted to find that someone from the ICANN business constituency and someone who is a concerned Indian citizen and such a well-wisher for our .in domain name, and so rooted in his identity with the IN domain name is here to offer his viewpoints, and it's a real privilege for us to have you here. And I'm sure that Dr. Govind and his associates would have taken note of the good points which you have offered regarding how to take the .in domain name further on its path of growth. Again, just to qualify, I'm not the best person to answer as to how the policy of the .in domain name may be driven per se, because that is essentially looked at by an independent officer who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Internet Exchange of India, the CEO of NICSI. His name is Mr. Sanjay Goyal. However, I do look at and formulate some perspectives on issues pertaining to NICSI from the Government of India and on behalf of the Government of India. And while I feel that I agree with you that a lot needs to be done in order to promote and proliferate the .in domain name amongst the people of India and even outside, in order to promote and increase the numbers. I would not venture so far to say that possibly, we need to take it to a space where it could compete with the .com domain name and give the .com domain name a run for its money. However, a lot more certainly needs to be done in order to grow the numbers. However, that also should kind of bring us to an important point in terms of how many of us, even in our businesses or even in our individual lives, ever bother to even get a domain name in the first place. So while a choice for a particular domain name, say .in or .com, is a different thing. However, first we need to look at the profile of a person who would go in for a domain name for establishing his identity on the web in the first place, and then possibly a segmentation of the approach in terms of who has greater propensity to go in for a .com domain name, who couldn't care less and is kind of undecided between taking a .com domain name and a .in domain name, and who would prefer to go in, or for whom it makes sense to go in for a .in domain name. And then possibly after categorizing the people into these kind of clusters, then possibly we would be able to do a more educated kind of a market segmentation and try and mobilize people who would otherwise go for a different domain name to kind of channelize that flow in the direction of a .in identity. And that having been said, I also personally feel that one good ploy could be, or one good strategy possibly could be to work more with advertising and promotion, which kind of tries to establish the concept of an Indian identity with that of the .in domain name. And that is something which I have seen also in the recent few months in the NIXI advertising, which is being put out both on social media as well as on the other spaces, and I think they're doing it very successfully. In fact, I must confess that I am quite impressed with the kind of promotion and the kind of publicity material which I now see coming out of late. And I'm sure that everybody in NIXI is also taking note and they're working hard at it. And I'm sure in the coming few days, you along with the others would be able to see that aim and that goal of increase in the numbers of NIXI .in domain name realized. Of course, it will be also in no small part also be contributed to by the growth of the IDNs and the uptake of the IDNs, which is also, I'm sure, I expect, is going to be leading to an increase in the numbers. There's been a lot of discussion around multilingual internet in the recent few months, and there's a lot of buzz around that subject. I must say, for those of you who were in attendance, I see some of you here who were in attendance on the Day Zero workshop. One of the 3 topics which were discussed was the multilingual internet theme, and I can say to you that that was the topic which was amongst those topics which generated the highest interest and the highest level of excitement and the highest level of debate and discussion. So from that, if there is any measure to go by, I'm sure many of the people here will also go ahead and book their own IDN domain names and contribute to the growth story of the .in. Thank you.
There were sessions yesterday on the multilingual internet and the other issues. Any other question, please? Anyone has? Yes. Give your mic here.
Hi sir, my name is Shashank, I'm a lawyer. And I'm not sure if this is the right question to you, and you can always indicate if it's not. You mentioned how many people actually look at getting a .in domain name. It just brought me thinking into this issue. With so much content of the government itself posted on online platforms, and ministers and secretaries, etc., everybody has Twitter accounts where they not only release, I would say, or let's say talk about government policies, etc., they also redress grievances of citizens online. I wonder if the ministry or the government generally has taken a view on the various concerns that are raised around that, about how private corporations are, hosting data of the government, even though it's all in the public domain. But there's a section of the public which talks about how government should have its own portals where these things should be hosted and not on private bodies like that. But I wonder if you're the right person for that, or it's not even not just a DRM issue, but it's also government owning its own data on its own platforms.
And of course, just as a corollary to that question, I would like to understand more as to what exactly is your concern regarding the use of government data on private websites. If you could clarify that more possibly.
So just to clarify my point, sir, I'm all for such engagements on private platforms as well. But I was wondering if there's a position taken by the government. Is it a conscious call for them to go ahead with it despite some concerns raised? And I'll highlight the concerns which are raised. For example, in addition to the government, let's say, having its own press information bureau where it makes its daily releases, the fact that it's engaging with the public or making the same releases or slight variations of it on private platforms, which are ultimately owned by, let's say, corporations in the US or some other country. Mind you, those corporations take a license over any content that you post on that. So it's a digital rights management issue that the government is actually giving a license to, let's say, its releases to other corporations. And second, in a way, it's also an ownership of data issue. I'm all for such engagement so long as it's also there on other platforms. But it's just an issue which I wanted to understand if the government has given it consideration.
So just to respond to that, I think as far as the ownership of the data is concerned, that is very well taken care of as per the Privacy and Data Protection Act, which is in the making, and I'm sure that as far as the ownership of the data from a legal perspective is concerned, that would set the thing to rest, any fears to rest in terms of who the ownership with who is the person or the authority with whom the ownership of that particular piece of data would lie. That having been said, as regards to the engagement of the government with other private entities is concerned, I think that is something to be lauded. In fact, it is part of the realization on part of the government, to see the writing on the wall and to smell the coffee in terms of the need for greater engagement with multi-stakeholder kind of entities, and hence you can't afford to kind of remain in silos that we deal only with PTI and we give our releases only through the PTI, and I'm sure the government in its new age of Thar is coming out and dealing or engaging, I would say, more effectively and more widely with all the stakeholders which are available in the ecosystem, and that is something which I personally feel is to be lauded. Thank you.
Amrita?
So since you represent GAC, while there was a question of what would be discussed at the GAC meetings, my question is that just as you have multi-stakeholder discussion at ICANN, is the Indian government also looking for comments from different stakeholders on the various GAC issues so that the GAC representation from India can have the comments from the different stakeholders? Simultaneously, though there was a question on IGF, I wanted to know, is there, and we are planning an India IGF from inSIG. We want to take that towards next year. As you know, we had the YIGF this time. We hope that the government will be supporting this initiative. Since you look after IGF, I'm taking this, and perhaps another thing is we don't have any particular discussion from India going this time? As in, we have different stakeholders having, who might be having their particular slots at IGF. Are we trying to plan something for 2018, some kind of an India discussion or something, just as China has done? Some panel discussion, anything at IGF? Because they are ambitious, we are ambitious too.
So just to answer your question, Amrita, I'll try to answer it as best to my ability. In my reply to one of the earlier questions also, I have indicated that we are all for multi-stakeholder decision-making process, and we try to utilize it as far as possible into our policies and positions that we advance, and wherever possible, we try to make use of that process. The same is the case for the IGF, and the same is the case for ICANN 63 meeting, and we would be utilizing the same process as far as possible.
Thank you. So I just wanted to follow up on the question, sorry sir, that in case anyone, for example the inSIG fellows, etc., ever want to send a comment on certain things to your office,
They are happy to send it to my email ID, and my email ID you could possibly share with everyone.
Thank you sir.
Thank you.
As such, I am also signed into various mailing lists, including even the Best Bits mailing list or the mailing list of the APR IGF, and I do receive all those emails apart from my ICANN mailing list. So I assure you that I have my hands and fingers on the pulse of the people, and we do take all that feedback very, very seriously, and we do take it on record into our deliberations on file, our discussions, and we do intend to take it forward in the same manner. Thank you.
Perhaps you can put in the inSIG that mailing list or the
I would be happy to be signed on to that.
WhatsApp group also.
Yeah.
That would be faster. Yes, Pradeep.
Good afternoon, sir. I just wanted to know more about the Internet Governance Division in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. As in, what is the scope of work? What are some of the initiatives which have already been undertaken? And are there any such initiatives in future that any of us can possibly contribute to?
So the Internet Governance Division in METI is essentially headed by our Joint Secretary, Dr. Jaideep Kumar Mishra. He, of course, is a career civil servant, and he's had long, successful stints in various positions of the Government of India, both in India and abroad. He has served on the International Monetary Fund also, and he under him has several officers. I think there are four more officers apart from him who form part of the Internet Governance Division. Then there is, of course, a section and a staff which we have at our disposal who deal with the filing work and the other requirements. That having been said, it is a very nimble kind of a structure. It's not a very bloated, typically, what one visualizes as a typical government organization. So it has, it's a very lean organization, and quite frankly, I feel it packs quite a punch because it kind of handles much more than its weight in terms of the wide sweep as well as the depth of coverage of the issues which we are dealing with, and possibly that has been made possible. I personally feel that has been made possible because most of us are really badly overworked, but that is my opinion, and you may differ. So we try our best to keep pace with all that is happening around us. This is an exceptionally dynamic field. We are assisted by a couple of policy analysts and technology analysts. So they help us formulate our positions and engage better with the other stakeholders. And well, just to answer your question, if you feel strongly about something going forward and you feel that that should be the way to go forward, then I strongly invite you to either send us an email or contact us in person by WhatsApp or even drop us a line, and then we could possibly come back to you to suggest what is the best way moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes, Krishna.
So this is specific to the role of data. So initially, the ministry had promoted open government data platform that was driven.
It still promotes that.
Yes, so it's aggressively promoted. So my question is, sir, on the platform you have aggregated data month-wise, state-wise clubbed together. Now with Ayushman Bharat and with India Stack coming in, will anonymized consolidated data or individual listing of the whole data be available on that particular portal, or for individual citizens as well as external organizations to analyze and support with further initiatives of the government? I believe that we can identify a lot of health issues by analyzing Ayushman Bharat.
Okay, so just to answer your question once again, you seem to be very heavily kind of cued into the data aspect of it, and I unfortunately am again the wrong person to ask, because I'm neither dealing with the Open Data Initiative nor with the other aspects of Ayushman Bharat and the other details which you sought. However, that having been said, I must I confirm to you that the government still supports the Open Data Initiative, and whatever data schemes which were available on the Open Data portal of the Government of India would definitely be there in future also, and would encompass all the other schemes of the Government of India which have hitherto been announced, and to the extent that it doesn't violate the rights of the citizens, I'm sure that data would be made available to you. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes. How much time you have? 5. Okay. Yes.
Sir, I really appreciate the recent initiative taken by Government of India and Internet governance. Sir, I have seen that on various ministry sites or on various government sites, the word comes not secure, and on many occasions we as citizens put our data. So, I mean, the Government of India, your department, is going to do something about that?
So while I'm not fully able to appreciate as to which specific sites you have encountered this problem, however, I would just like to try and answer that to the best of my ability in terms of the great work which is being done by the Government of India in trying to advance the level of cybersecurity on the various platforms of the Government of India which are available to the citizens for offering citizen-centric services. So we from the Government of India are doing a lot in terms of trying to spread greater awareness about how to transact safely online. And of course, with the advent of other privacy regimes and our own privacy and data protection legislation coming up, this is only likely to intensify in the future, because once there is greater